Welcome back to the Upper Tier Podcast, the football podcast we bring you each and every week on the Dynamo Podcast Network. Head over to YouTube there, smash that subscribe and bell notification button. And as always, the show is brought to you by Hogan Elite Trophy Wear. Head over to Facebook there, the market sort you with a discount for any silverware you need for that special occasion. Joining me today for the second episode in our Legend series, where we're going to look at the career of the one and only Mr. Roy Keane, near and dear to all our hearts, because obviously being Irish and you boys being Man United fans. But joining me today, of course, is Ted. Ted is joining me from Retrotainment, one of the shows on the network, who takes a look back at classic movies and gaming and anything really retro. Ted, how are you doing?
Not too bad, bud. Delighted to be on this one now.
Yeah, and tell us, you just dropped an episode there on The Lion King.
Yeah, well, I dropped the first part of the episode. There's a second part to come. It was obviously with Ian's better half, Rachel, who's a super fan. So we did the film, but then the talk kept going with her collection and, you know, kind of her, I don't want to say obsession, but like obsession, really, it is, with The Lion King. So that I'm looking forward to that getting out now and everyone seeing all the stuff she knows about the film and all the little bits about it.
Well, if there's three men on a podcast that know a lot about being obsessed about collecting stuff,
yeah,
we couldn't pick three better guys now. Darren also joining us, our Man United man, who's an OG on the podcast these days. How are you doing, Darren?
Hey, Noel. Good to see you, man.
Good. Great to have you on. So, I suppose, where do we begin? Born the 10th of August, 1971. The man is 49, similar to myself. Born in Cork, Ireland, of course, as we know. Honours with Manchester United, 7 leagues, 4 FA Cups, 4 Community Shields. I said I'd include them because I know United fans like to include the Community Shield, so I put them. One UEFA Champions League, which I was kind of surprised at, really. I thought he probably should have had a few more, to be honest. And of course, one Intercontinental Cup, of which he was the man who scored the winner. So let's go back. Let's deep dive back into this. Go back to 1993. Darren, where to begin? Nottingham Forest get relegated. Roy Keane has a clause, he's available. And in comes Man United, and away we go with the journey.
Yeah, so I suppose I remember at the time, I was only, probably 8 or 9, but I do remember at the time him coming in for a British transfer record. And at that stage, when lads were moving and they put the tag on that British transfer record, it kind of created a little bit of a buzz about things. You thought, oh, this guy must be all right. I hadn't seen a whole lot of him at Forest, and I was kind of wondering where he was going to fit into the United setup, obviously, but the initial impact was pretty good, and he gave us a new kind of a focal point in that midfield.
Yeah, I was talking to 2 Man United fans yesterday, and we were just chewing the fat really about him. I think, if I can remember right, Mark, one of the lads that was on the podcast, was telling me he was over at the match with his dad where he made his debut. I think it was against Sheffield. I think United, was it, or Wednesday? I think Sheffield United. And he scored 2 goals. And the lads left the ground rubbing their hands thinking, here we go, we have this box-to-box attacking midfielder, which couldn't be further from the truth, really, with the way it turned out, He obviously came in to replace Brian Robson, who was unbelievable footballer, who had he was coming towards the end of his career and he was picking up injuries and stuff like that. Picked up injuries that season, which gave Keane the opportunity to cement his place in the first team, basically. Obviously scored the winner in the derby in '93 against City, and obviously goes on that season then and wins his first league and cup double. Not a bad start to a career, really, coming in, considering he came in from a relegated Nottingham Forest. So then we move on to let's move on quickly to 1994. This is where it was a tough season, really, after coming off the back of the double, because they lose out to the league to Blackburn, and we get the infamous Gareth Southgate stamp, and he picks up the first red card of 11 red cards in his Manchester United career. Ted, any thoughts back then on kind of
I don't have a whole lot of thoughts back then. I still only a young nipper at that stage, but 11 red cards. I'm actually surprised it's that little, to be honest. With all Roy Keane, some of the highlights you remember of him are probably red card offences now. Anyway,
Yeah,
But
but based on what stories are coming out these days from referees back then, we know why there wasn't a whole load more other red cards.
yeah, they feared the man, and with good reason, when you see him on a football pitch, you can see why people might have been a bit timid of him, and that's something he got from kind of when he was growing up. I got that when he was reading his book that he was talking about, like when he was a young lad, he was only small, and he hated bullies and stuff, so he had to kind of build that persona around himself as a hard man. So came into the league with that persona, and then obviously had the big shoes to fill of Brian Robson, which not going to be an easy task. But I think he did step up to that quite quickly as well. Like it wasn't like nowadays where someone's coming in and it's like they're gonna be the next this, they're gonna be the next that, and then they kind of don't really live up to it. Keane had that drive in him from a young age to be the best.
Yeah, I think for anyone who was socialised down in Cork City, like the night out in Cork City, it's not for the faint-hearted. You know what I mean? So growing up around Cork and stuff like that, you were going to be sort of battle-hardened in some respects, Let's move on. 1995-96 season rolls around. Ince moves on. Mark Hughes moves on. Kanchelskis moves on. And then in comes Beckham, Scholes, and Butt. And they move on to another double. The infamous league win over Newcastle. Mr. Kevin Keegan, I'd love it. How could we forget it? And an FA Cup win over my beloved Liverpool, over the so-called Spice Boys in the white suits. Cantona broke my heart that day with that goal. Darren, what's your memories of that?
Those absolute hideous suits that you lads had on for starters. It was a scorcher that day as well. But I think at that stage, United were kind of starting to gain a little bit of dominance in England. That was the start of it for me, where I kind of felt like we were going to build something, some sort of a legacy, as opposed to, just winning a league here and there. We had started to kind of put the wheels down and get a bit of traction out of moving forward with Ferguson and with the way that we were going to play and stuff like that, I don't think Keane himself had an amazing season that year, but I think the young lads coming in would have probably put a bit more pressure on the likes of Keane, that they needed to take up a slightly more senior role of the squad.
Yeah, I think the one thing we find about Roy Keane through his career is, although he was a natural leader, he also had a knack for taking players and making them play way above their own capabilities. So he brought everyone along with him, which is a trait these days that's missing badly in football. When you look at club captains these days, they might be able to inspire themselves, but they find it very hard to inspire people around them. I mean, if you look, take a look at Bruno Fernandes at the moment. It was like an absolute baller himself, but at times he gets frustrated because there's such a gap between his quality and the quality around him, and he finds it hard to bring those guys up. So his expectation often ends up disappointed, if you like. Same with Harry Maguire. If you look at Harry Maguire, he doesn't necessarily inspire the players around him. Because he's struggling with his own situation and becoming club captain of such a big club. It's a similar thing. But when you look at Keane, I mean, when you think about, how good Scholes and Butt and Beckham and the Nevilles and all these players came in, your class of 92, when you think about how good they were when they came in playing with Keane and how Keane drove them on to be such good players, often playing well above what your expectation would be for them as players, which made them world class.
I think that's kind of the biggest thing for Roy Keane. I know he gets overlooked a little bit in terms of like how good a player he was. A lot of people don't remember how good he actually was. Now, I'm not saying he's not like a Bruno Fernandes or anything like that. He's not that kind of quality baller, but it's the simple stuff. Roy Keane did the simple stuff well, and he didn't fuck up simple stuff, which is, people say that's the basics, but a lot of the lads nowadays can't seem to do the basics. So it's very important that he was able to do that. And then the bigger stuff he was able to do as well. And then those younger players did come in, and we lost some big players that year. Like as you said, Ince was gone. I know they were kind of getting to the end of their careers, but that's still, if you're a player on that team, you have to be thinking to yourself, like, we've lost 3 big names here, and we're getting David Beckham, which, at the time, no one knew much about David Beckham. You're going, we're bringing this lad in. Like, is he going to be up to scratch? Is he going to do it? And they did play well, and they're young lads, and you can't win anything with kids, but you obviously can, as we've seen. But I think Roy Keane does. He wasn't captain at that time, but I think, as you said, he did have that influence around the team, where he was like, "You need to step up. Like, mediocrity isn't good enough. Excellence is what's required here."
Well, you can see it even to this day when you listen to him in his punditry, and he goes, when he looks when Man United are playing in his Sky Sports studio, you can tell by the way he comes across. He says this is not acceptable for a club like Man United, where he still has that level that he would expect them to reach, and more often than not, they kind of disappoint. They fall short of what his expectation would be. Even when you hear him talking about Maguire as a captain, he goes, "It's just not where it should be from his own experience." So we move on to 97, 98, and this must be an interesting year for you guys. Probably you reflect on it with a bit of sadness as well. The King retires, Mr. Eric Cantona, and Roy gets promoted and becomes the club captain. And this is where we really see, the man stepping up. But unfortunately, through a tackle with Alfie Inga Haaland, he does his cruciate and he's out for most of the season. Arsenal win the league. And this kind of starts this is what lit the fire, I think, in the monster in the man. I often refer to Roy Keane as being a kind of a Jekyll and a Hyde. Just that craziness in the background at that moment where it can just explode. And this, I think, is the real start where Haaland accused him of feigning the injury, but he had actually done his cruciate, and he really took that. He took that really bad. And no doubt we'll get in later as to how it all evolves. So yeah, 98, 99. This is the year, if there was ever the year for United,
Yeah, there was a sad year followed by probably one of the greatest years of all time.
Yeah, Darren, you chime in here. Tell me about the treble.
I'm still dreaming about it, Niall. What am I at that stage? I'm maybe 14, 15 years of age. So your interest in football is like absolutely through the roof. You're playing it, you're watching it, it's just 24/7, and you're supporting a team and a club like United that are just absolutely flying. And I don't, at any stage in that season, ever kind of think we were going to not win the treble, if that makes sense. We had the FA Cup game with Liverpool, then we the FA Cup game with Arsenal. We'd obviously the group of death in the Champions League. We had Bayern and we had Barcelona, Bromby in it. We got the two heavy wins against Bromby, and then I think we 4 draws other than that, and we just managed to get through. But I mean, you're playing top sides, and you were living with them, and you were beating them each and every week. It was a really, really good season to be a Man United fan. And then I suppose the only thing, little bit of trepidation going forward was we had opportunities in Europe up until that point and hadn't managed to kind of hammer things home. But with that team, you kind of thought this is the one that's going to get us over the line, until that night in the Camp Nou, and you're like, squeaky bum time,
Yeah.
I remember that watching in the sitting room in my mum and dad's house. My uncle was a big United fan, and he rang the landline at the end of the game, when I was like 14 years of age, like crying, like Man United just won the Champions League, and just amazing, really, really was, and then to obviously for that to be to finish the third leg of the treble, because obviously Bayern were going for the treble that year as well. They just won the German League Cup as well.
Yeah.
Somebody was going to walk out of there as the undisputed, let's say, and thankfully it was us on that night.
Ted, what's your memories? You must have been full of emotion watching that.
Yeah, so I was I was 9 or 10 or so at the time, I think. And I'm not from a big footballing family, so like my dad when I was younger used to tell me he supported Blackburn Rovers, right? But I've never seen him in a Blackburn Rovers shirt, and I never seen him watch a Blackburn Rovers game in his fucking life. The most football that lad ever watched was when Ireland played. And he used to bring me to a couple of Ireland games. So for me, it was kind of, I got to pick what team I wanted to support. And a lot of people say, obviously you went to United because United were winning. And for me, that was actually never the case. Roy Keane is the reason that I supported Man United, because I went to an Irish game. There was one around my birthday nearly every year. So I used to go to, my dad used to bring me there for my birthday. You weren't in the best seats all the time, but, there's still
you're in the stadium.
You're in the stadium and you got to enjoy it. I mean, at that time we had a decent enough side as well. So we were usually against some of those shit teams like Gibraltar and stuff, and you'd get the win. So good night out. And I remember Roy Keane being there, and I was just like, he's the best player we have. Like, he's the best. So I made the decision then, like, that whoever he plays for, that's who I'm going to support. So, like, fortunately, he'd moved on from Nottingham Forest at the time, because otherwise I'd have been a bloody Nottingham Forest fan, and that'd be really
could have been
depressing.
grim, Ted.
Yeah, that would have been really depressing. I'd have to give up on that dream. But no, he moved to United, and so we didn't have like the channels and stuff. So I just kind of watch around somebody else's house if I could. So we'd obviously had the league wrapped up, the FA Cup wrapped up, and then it's the Champions League final, and it's not looking well for us up like during the game. And I just remember it got near to the end of the game, and I just kind of wanted to turn it off because I knew we weren't winning. Like, it's like, we're not winning. But you can't turn off. You never turn a game off before it's over, before the final whistle blows. And when we got that one back, I started to believe then. I was like, is this? And it's kind of similar, Niall, as you were talking to the lads the other week about Chelsea winning the Champions League. We'd had the opportunities in the past. And I didn't have to really deal with that because I was too young to really remember any of that. But I knew, like, the commentators tell you and stuff, they've had chances in the past, and it's always passed them by. But there was something in the air that night that made you feel it. And just winning that was just, it's the icing on the cake. And it's just a feeling, even when you go back and watch that game now, like if I sit down and watch that full game now, knowing the result, knowing what happens, it still gets me, I'd say, near enough to the point that I was when I was a kid. Like,
my memory of that was, I remember Bayern went up the other end and they hit either the bar or the post. I think it was the bar. They hit it off.
A couple of times.
Yeah, and I remember when Solskjaer scored. I just remember the great Oliver Kahn, who was an outstanding player. He drops to his knees like a sniper had shot him out of the stand. And I just remember in the same picture, one of the Bayern defenders on the ground, and he's just trashing the ground like this. He's just pounding the ground like this. They just couldn't believe what just happened. It was kind of nearly like the war all over again, wasn't it? Like, when you think about it. But it was an unbelievable season that season, and you got to remember, Keane's finest hour was in the semi-final. He literally single-handedly.
Yeah, he misses the final because of the cards, but yeah,
drove us past Juventus. You know what I mean, to get to the final. And it was I always found back then, even when it was United and I was a Liverpool fan, I always thought that if you picked up a card, to give you a ban in a semi-final, I always thought that maybe that ban should have carried over to the following season and it shouldn't be included in the final. That if you put in so much work on the road to the final, that you shouldn't have been denied that. And I think he was. I know at the end he celebrated and stuff like that and all, but
didn't put his full kit on though.
No, also, but I mean, to have not taken part in the final.
Yeah, it's a harsh one for him.
I mean, that must have been a very tough one to live down.
And especially since it's the only, as you said, it's the only Champions League final that United won in his tenure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to know he was integral in getting us there, to making sure that we won that.
Yeah.
And as you said, Arsenal had won the league the year before with him being out for most of it. I think that drove him. Like to near insanity, and that's what pushed him to push this team that hard that year.
Yeah, especially when you think of like the whole feud with Arsenal, really, that year being out would have killed him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we go into then. Let's go 99 2000. This is where we're starting to see a little bit of the problems of Alden, let's say, manifested themselves. He turns down an initial $2 million a year offer, but reached an agreement mid-season. But the club came out and kind of pinned an increase in ticket prices on his renewed contract, and he drove the club to apologise over that. So here we're seeing the fracture beginning between player and club. United's defence of the Champions League ended with Real Madrid, and Keane actually scored an OG. So it's really starting to unravel a bit. But they do, in fairness, another league title comes along, and he was voted PFA Player of the Year and the Football Writers Footballer of the Year, which is still, an outstanding achievement for himself. But yeah, it was kind of like, just that whole thing there with, like, he was the cause of the price increase on the tickets and stuff like that. But that was kind of like very bad PR for the club at the time, if I remember. Your memories of that?
Very bad PR. Yeah, it was extremely bad PR. But they threw him under the bus there completely, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was obviously nothing to do with Roy or the deal. At that stage, things are starting to become big business in Manchester, and they decided, we're going to capitalize on this and try and line our own pockets and make the club a bit bigger and have a bigger transfer fund and bigger wages and stuff like that. But to throw your captain out under the bus like that was, it was a bit despicable, really. And I mean, Roy was right to kind of bite back and say, well, hold on a fucking minute here, lads, you know that's not true, and I know that's not true. So let's set the record straight, because the worst thing you can have at teams is even a fan having a whiff that you're not, pulling in the same direction. We've seen it with other players, Rooney had it at United as well, where fans turned on him quick enough, and then of course he comes back in and scores a few goals and everything's forgotten. But you don't want that, especially when you're one of the the leading player on the pitch for us,
Yeah, so we move on to then Ted 2000, 2001, and we see the spawning of the prawn sandwich brigade. And this is where Keane has a go off the fans based on what's happening on match day and stuff like that. He's of the belief that most of the stadium is filled with patrons that wouldn't bleed the red blood of Man United, and that they were there for their few drinks and their prawn sandwiches, and that the whole sort of, what would we call it, the whole marketing side of the club is really taken off, which I'm sure didn't sit well with the fans either. So he's only after getting over being thrown under the bus by the club, and now he's having to go off the fans. So that fracture is starting to widen.
I think Roy Keane is the sort of man that if you wrong him in any way, it leaves a bitter taste in his mouth, and he doesn't just get over it. And I think the previous year, as you said, like, he was thrown under the bus and he didn't take that lightly, didn't take it lying down, and he was like, listen, I'm not having people think I'm the reason that the fucking prices have gone up, because all fans still want to come to the games. Because I know they talk about players playing for the money and playing for the badge. Roy Keane, I don't think, played for money, and I don't think he particularly played for a particular badge. Roy Keane played for Roy Keane, and whatever club he was at, he was going to give everything he had to that club. And for Man United to come out and say that he was the reason ticket prices were, going up, and he was saying, no, it's not, like, this is what I'm worth. Like, if I go anywhere else, that's what I'd be paid. So I should be paid here, and I want to stay here. And I think there was still a bitter taste in his mouth. So he hit out at not all fans. I think it was just at those fans that he didn't perceive as real football fans. People who were there because Man United were a success, who were there to capitalise on the money that was being made, and that the ticket prices had gone up now, and they were there to capitalise on that.
Yeah, but I think in fairness at that time, I mean, football was becoming this big marquee brand, you know what I mean? And like, marketing was going through the roof. United were, arguably, the biggest, if not one of the biggest clubs in the world. So like, it was their job, to absolutely market themselves worldwide as a global brand and bring these things in. I mean, where did Roy Keane think his wages was coming from? You know what I mean? So
I know,
yeah,
but I think to him, like, and I'm not saying he's right or anything, but I think to him, that isn't what football was about. He never felt that football was about that. It wasn't about making money and being a brand. It was about winning titles, about winning football matches. So to him, he felt, you threw me under the bus so you could line your pockets. And yes, I benefit from it. But at the same time, don't dare disrespect this game. Like, this is something that he loved football as we all do. But like, I think he loved it on a different level to most people.
Yeah, but I suppose if you're a fan looking in, I mean, you're talking about a time where he had originally turned down a new contract.
Yeah.
So it's hard at that time to say, well, it wasn't about money, when clearly it kind of was to some respect,
Yeah, but it's about earning, like, getting what you think you deserve. It was the same as, like, not to go too far into it, but in like basketball, it was the same as with the Chicago Bulls at the time, when all the players were on big contracts except one. And he was like, I was stupid when I was younger to sign a really long deal, and I'm not getting paid what I'm worth. So he was like, I'm not playing anymore. Like, I want to leave until you pay me what I'm worth.
Isn't it amazing in the bigger scheme of things now, looking back, that it was buttons,
Yeah,
in reality,
peanuts.
Peanuts, I mean, some lads now are getting paid that a week,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk then. This was also the year where, he effectively, and I'll put it out there, ended Alfie Inga Haaland's career. And I'm not going to mince my words on saying that, because the player came back and he was never the same after that. I mean, he did a proper number on Haaland and wrote about it and broadcasted it and never hit it. And he was banned for 5 games and fined 150,000.
He got off lightly.
Yeah, these days it'd be GBH and you'd be doing a stretch.
He got off lightly, man. Yeah, 100%. It's probably the most despicable thing I've ever seen on a football pitch, if I'm honest. Like, with it being so premeditated, like, and even as a United fan, it kind of made you wince. You kind of went, Jesus, man. Like, as a United fan, I'm extremely proud of United and our history and stuff like that. And I want players that are going to represent our club and our fans in the right kind of way. And that was stomach churning, man. It really was. It didn't sit well with me at all. I just think there's no place for it on a football pitch. If you go to play a game of football, you should be able to walk home at the end of it, barring an accident, not, what Keane did, which was just premeditated butchery, like.
Yeah. You kind of got the feeling at the time that he nearly had a side chat with the teammate saying, make sure that lad sees plenty of the ball. That kind of way, because it wasn't
I wouldn't be shocked.
Because I think if I remember back in that match as well, I think he had Haaland had picked up the ball a few times and Keane was sniffing around him before that moment came. So it
he'd certainly had one little bite.
Yeah.
And didn't kind of get what he thought of it, and then went, opportunity knocked. And I mean, the way, but as you're saying it, you want somebody to maybe get a touch of the ball, but the way the ball bounces up,
he's not getting near it.
He's not getting near it, and allows him then to kind of go high and really maim.
What was your thoughts on that, Ted?
It's disgusting, as Dan said. It's stomach churning. It's disgusting, and it's not something you ever want to see in a game of football. And it wasn't like, not that like it's not that it would be acceptable at all. But if City were like a threat to them at that time, where it was like, if I take this player out, that guarantees us winning the league. You can at least see why there was, it's for the team, it's for, the club. You can at least see that he was doing it for, a bigger purpose. It wasn't. It was just a personal vendetta. It was still as I said earlier, he just keeps a bitter taste in his mouth, and it was still a bitter taste. And what the bitter taste was that when he'd been down on the ground, Haaland had called him, out for faking it, basically called him a liar. And he's come out and he said that the one thing he doesn't like being called is a liar. That's the only, he didn't care about the injury all that much, because, Haaland didn't cause the injury. It was being called a liar that stuck with him. And to him, he seemed to feel he was justified. Now, he's not justified. And what he did that's criminal. Like, 5 games and 150 grand is nothing. Like, that's criminal. Like, you should be going to a prison for that. It's grievous bodily harm at the end of the day. That's all that is.
I would actually consider that a worse act than what Cantona did.
Cantona's is a reaction, an instantaneous reaction. This is something that he's gone out and he said, the second I get a chance, I'm going to do him.
Yeah, it was premeditated, really, when you think about
it. 100%.
So
and he doesn't back down from that. Like, he says, like, I knew I was going out there. Like, he still admits it. Like, I was going out there and I was going to hurt him.
Yeah. And he certainly did.
So
then we move on. 2001, 2002. Season finishes trophyless. And Keane comes out and lays the blame on the players. This is where we really see. Now the wound is gaping open and the blood is flowing fully, This is him calling out his own teammates that they're not good enough. Which for a club like Man United, it may have been the case, but certainly not something that you would mention vocally. 2002, 2003, he was fined 150 grand by Sir Alex Ferguson. He got a 3-match ban for elbowing Jason McAteer, my man from Liverpool. It was at Sunderland, I think, at the time.
Sunderland, yeah, that's right.
And he then received that 5-game ban for his comments over Haaland, where he came straight out and said, "Damn right I did it." You know what I mean? So he took that time out and he went off and he had hip surgery. changed his style of play, I think, for about probably 2 to 3 games, I would imagine. And then all of a sudden, we get the Roy Keane back because he felt that the way the change of play had changed him with the hip surgery, he was less influential. So the old Keane returned, and he delivers another league title. So it's hard to argue at times with the man. I mean, for all the craziness and the madness of the Jekyll and Hyde character, the trophies are still coming in and the leagues are still being delivered. So then we move on to let's discuss the United Arsenal rivalry, which is a very interesting dynamic, really, because you have Keane, who's so vocal and of course so violent and wears his heart on his sleeve, and then you have Vieira, who's the Frenchman, who like provokes him in only the way a Frenchman can, a la Robert Pires and Emmanuel Petit, the way they used to absolutely goad players into doing silly things on the pitch. Keane comes out and he calls out Vieira, saying that how come he declared for France and not his beloved Senegal? And Vieira responds with, the man who walked out on his team in Saipan calling me out for who I declare for my national team. And so the wound is like so deep. And then we remember also the tunnel incident.
Yeah.
Where the two boys were ready to nearly go 12 rounds and the referee interfered, and Keane made it very clear. If there was ever a time, if he hadn't have come out and declared what he did to Haaland, that conversation in the tunnel where he told Vieira he'd see him out on the pitch, I'll see you out there, made it very clear that everything was premeditated with this man. There's no doubt about it. He jointly holds the record for most red cards in English football at the time. And he was inducted into the English Football Hall of Fame in 2004. And he was the only Irish player selected for the FIFA 100, a list that was generated of live footballers by Pele. So this man was revered in football circles. But I mean, obviously, some of these moments in his career kind of overshadow such a stellar career that he had. So then let's move on to the departure. Some people would say that, you know, they could see it coming. Some people have described it as being unexpected, but it was very clear that the relationship with Ferguson had fractured. Darren, what was your memories of that?
Yeah, I suppose I could kind of see it coming, Cam. You know, it had gone back and forth a number of times. You know, Keane was showing himself out to be a little bit of like that flawed genius. You know, was outstanding for United on the pitch, but off the pitch, there was so many issues. You know, he just I find Keane as quite a selfish figure myself. You know, obviously we spoke about the money side of things. I'm a little bit like Ted. I don't particularly feel like he played football for money, although I do understand maybe his agent wanted him to get what he felt like was a decent value for himself. But I felt Keane was extremely selfish in a lot of stuff he did, and only ever really thought about himself, and you know, didn't see maybe the team hoisting trophies, saw it as himself and what can I add to my collection to make me a bigger player, you know what I mean? And I think when he realised his United career was coming to an end, he saw an opportunity to maybe head up north and try and add to it, you know?
Yeah, it's at this point where we're getting the Man U TV gate, if you like, where he went on and he did an interview on Man United TV that couldn't be aired. But the comments coming out of that TV by United personnel was that, like, this was the end. This is where he went in on the team, went in on the club, and got very, very personal. And I think it was probably a time as well. I think Fergie, for his greatness, was realising that a different style of management was needed now, and it was no longer where he had used Keane for years to put the build into players to get them to do what needed to be done. In some respects, Keane was nearly, you know, Fergie's errand boy in doing the dirty side of what needed to be done at times. But I think Fergie recognised very quickly as you enter into 2005 like you can't really do those things now. It doesn't really work, and it's not the kind of approach that still motivates players, if you like. So we see the interview on MUTV being pulled. Obviously, Keane clearly not happy about that, but obviously a lot of stuff from it leaked out. And then we see strained tensions where they go off to a pre-season camp in Portugal, and Roy Keane goes in on Fergie, not dissimilar to Saipan, and saying, this is a joke. And he's not happy. Delivers more teammate criticism. And Keane's interview said the club wanted him out because of previous tension with Carlos Queiroz and Ferguson. So relations were strained. And as we know, in the history of Man United Football Club under the Fergie era, once relationships get strained with Alex Ferguson, there's only going to be one winner. And he has put many a top footballer out that door. And not necessarily just at the end of their career, but he's no problem making the hard decisions to get rid of players, even at the height of the career. When you think back of like David Beckham and stuff like that, when players were starting to begin to think that they were bigger than the club, the door opened up and you were put straight out. Yeah, looking back then, he was given a testimonial, and he generated the highest gate for a testimonial in English football record. And all the revenue off the testimonial was awarded to his beloved charity, the Irish Guide Dogs for the Blind, which is also a measure of the man, if you could imagine that. So start with you, Ted. Your favourite Roy Keane goal and your favourite Roy Keane moment.
Yeah, I think the favourite Roy Keane goal is probably the one against Juventus in the semi-final, the captain's goal to start dragging us over because of the importance of it. I know he had a couple of goals that probably won us games, but I think without him doing that, we don't get to that final. So that's definitely my favourite Roy Keane goal, I would say. The moment, don't really know, like, it's not really a moment for me with Roy Keane. It's just his presence in that United squad is what I really remember. How he dragged, he didn't accept mediocrity, didn't accept anything but anyone's best. That's what I remember him for. Like, he was never the footballer that, say, Paul Scholes was. He was never the genius the way Eric Cantona was, but he had a little bit of all of that in him, and enough drive and determination to make what he had work. Yeah,
I remember when he won one of the trophies and he hoisted it up, and I just remember that image of him going, "You beauty." Remember that one?
Yeah.
God, that was just classic Roy Keane. Darren, favourite moment and favourite goal?
Yeah, I suppose like Ted, the Juventus goal is the one which he'll always be remembered for. By United fans, certainly. I suppose rather than a favourite moment, I suppose just the moment I just remember him for most is just Saipan. I know that's extensive to United, but it just blew me away that he would go to a World Cup and whatever you're at a World Cup. Ireland were in good shape at that stage. You've heard the players say if we'd Keane in that Spain game, we'd have beaten them.
Yeah, 100%.
And to basically, I feel like he not only he was extremely selfish at that time, but he let his teammates and he let the country down. And that for me is the overriding kind of bad taste left in my mouth about it.
Yeah, I don't know, but based on that, Darren, would you think is that bad management as well? Because you're meant to be the manager of Ireland, right? And you know what Roy Keane's like. Roy Keane has come out and he's told you what you are doing isn't this training ground isn't good enough. You've sent the goalkeepers home when we're meant to be having a practice match. And as far as he was concerned, if anyone on that team couldn't score on an open fucking net, good luck to them. They shouldn't be in the squad anyway. Because he'd left and he told Alex Ferguson before he left, he was like, I'm going to win that World Cup. And Ferguson has come out and said he didn't doubt it. In Roy Keane's head, Roy Keane was winning that World Cup with Ireland. And that's probably the best squad that Ireland have ever had. But I still don't think it was a World Cup winning squad. Now, with Roy Keane there, you never know what you were going to get.
Yeah.
He didn't feel...
We probably don't look at that Greek squad that won the Euros and thought it was the best ever either. But if you can get someone to drive you on, there's no reason why we couldn't go to a semi or maybe even a final.
Well, we would have got past
Um,
Spain for sure, because I have no doubt there. Whether we would have gone
yeah,
much further is questionable. But I think that's bad management. You know that Roy Keane's not going to accept that. So don't tell him apologise or
you
go
do,
home.
but well, that Roy's not going to accept it. But there's also certain things, I mean, that you can't do anything about. Like if the training kit gets lost on the way over, and it doesn't arrive on time, and if Roy knew that 2 days out they were moving to a new training pitch. They were only there on the island for a short time. They were moving to mainland, and they were going to have what's described as the best training pitch that was over there. So that's
Yeah,
that hot-headedness. That's that, act first, think later that we saw on the pitch with elbowing and stamping, and like there isn't an awful lot of petulance with Keane as well.
there is, but I
Where
think
if
demanding a
he
public
could have taken
apology.
a breath.
I don't think you can't ask someone like Roy Keane for a private apology. You might get. Don't ask him to come out publicly and say I was wrong, because he doesn't think he was wrong, and I think that was a little bit. I think they were both at fault for Saipan.
Yeah, but I think the problem with the public apology, Ted, was the thing had become so public.
I know, yeah.
What's a private apology going to do? You know what I mean? I think as well, it was a bit doggedness on him as well to lay the blame at Mick Storer as well. You know what I mean? I mean, a lot of these things that happened. I mean, Mick McCarthy wasn't bringing the team over to a tarmac car park as it's been described to train.
Yeah,
that wasn't Mick.
I know,
as Darren said, the kit going missing. That wasn't Mick. And if you're the captain of a national team, I mean, you should support your manager. You should be the one coming out and going, look, these things have happened. We know they've happened. They're being dealt with. I'm here to support Mick. You know what I mean? I'm here to support the team. He walked out on his national team. You know what I mean? And I know we're mainly dealing with his United career, but when you look back at that, and then you look back at those other things like the Holland stuff, you look back at going in on his teammates, you look at the fractured relationship with Fergie, all these things add up, even when the Portuguese camp, and all these things, you know what I mean? Like this guy over time became very bitter and really had an axe to grind, you know what I mean? And at times, like if that's your leader and that's your captain, he's the guy who should walk out. He should be the guy meeting with the squad and saying, this ain't great. We know it's not great, but we're going to sort it. In 2 days, we're going elsewhere, and we're going to give this World Cup a right go. This guy, when our team was in the World Cup doing as good as it could do, I should have done a lot better and would have done a lot better. This guy's at home walking his retriever.
Yeah, but he was told apologise or go home. I don't think he shouldn't have been given an ultimatum. He's not the sort of person that I don't manage the guy, but even I can see he's not the sort of person you do that to. You don't give him an ultimatum. You tell him, like, listen, it's not acceptable. We're moving. We know that this is wrong. I'm not saying that Mick McCarthy is the one that's in the wrong here either. The FAI are the ones that are in the wrong. They screwed the pooch on this big time. But it's just something you just have to, like, he's a genius, but there's a madness to him, and you just have to, I suppose, kind of give into that ego a little bit, I think, at sometimes, and just say, you're right, you're in the right here, you're correct, and we are moving, and we're doing our best to get this all sorted. Don't tell him apologise or go home, because if you put him like up against the wall, his back's against the wall, he's going to fight, and you told him go home. I can tell you now that if that was said to him now, he'd do the same. He'd go home.
Yeah, but I mean, clearly he wouldn't, because if this is a man of principle, I mean, he belittled the management team and he belittled the organisation in the world, in the eyes of the world. Okay, yeah. So there has to be some sort of a public apology and try and move on. But don't forget down the road, Ted, this is a man who had no problem picking up FAI checks later in his career of management.
I know, yeah.
mean? So, like, if you're talking about a man in terms of principle, you know what I mean? If that's what you are, like, why go back there again to take a paycheck? You know what I mean?
I'm not even saying it's in principle, though. I think it's in his nature. If you put him in a tough situation and put him with his back against the wall, he won't back down, ever. No matter no matter how wrong he is, he won't back down. And as a management, that's what you're a manager for, to play off, to understand your players. And you put him against the wall and you know how he's going to react.
Yeah, but in the way that he reacted, Ted, he put the backs of every other player in management there. Their backs all went against the wall, because now they knew we'd lost our leader, we'd lost our captain, and now it was going to be an uphill struggle.
he'd completely alienated himself from the whole management and from the team. You know, at that point, bar Keane coming back on bended knee, which, you know, as you say, Ted, he was never going to do. Nothing was going to suffice those players. I mean, how do you know going into a game that he's going to give you what you need him to do? Is it better that he goes home and walks his dog and you play with Matty Holland and he gets you a goal against Cameroon in the first game because you know he's playing for that jersey? Because Keane could have really down tools on that pitch. You know,
I don't think he could. Genuinely, I don't think Roy Keane. If you put Roy Keane onto a football pitch, I don't think he can down tools. Genuinely, don't think he had that in him. Like as he said, he still feels disrespected by the Alex Ferguson quote of he covered every blade of grass. He says, like, to him, that's disrespectful because he's like, what else am I supposed to do? I'm out there to play football. All he cares about when he's on that pitch is winning. That's all he cares about is winning. Other than the few moments of madness where he's gone out with an axe to grind. But I think,
yeah, but can you trust a guy with that who's gonna rip you to shreds? You know, basically rip you new arsehole in front of the press and say this, that, and a brand new hat about you. Can you trust him then to go out on a pitch? Like, does he then get the hump when he's out there and end up stamping on someone like he did Haaland and getting a 3-game ban? Then you're in a worse position because you've got this bull in the hotel for 3 weeks.
I know you get it. I know it was after, but you saw it at United as well. He came out, criticised all the players, criticised management, but it never showed in his on-pitch work. You know, yeah, I don't think he had it in him to down tools and not play the game when he was out there. Yeah, whatever about off the pitch, I don't think on the pitch he could do it.
But I think, you know, in fairness, you know, if he cared so much about winning, you know, he would have found a way to get back out there for that Ireland team. You know, if his care was about winning and not about principle, you know what I mean? I mean, he just got into a principle wrangle with Mick McCarthy.
There was pride there, and that's something that he couldn't back. That he couldn't be seen as the weak one, and that's just something he couldn't do.
Yeah, like you hear even in his interviews, even to this day, when he talks about it, he goes, "They wanted me to do an apology." Why can't do an apology? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's, you know what I mean? I mean, no disrespect to the man. I mean, the man had he had a stellar career that's blotted with moments of craziness. And you can even see to this day, look, he's touting himself out for the Celtic job. And let's be honest, that's, you know, in my eyes anyway, the only reason he's going up there for that Celtic job is to create that war with Gerrard. There's no doubt about it. You know what I mean? Yeah. That he wants to revisit that situation again. It's not like the agenda is not necessarily about making Celtic great again, because if you look at all the teams he's managed, most of them have imploded. You know what I mean? And he'll, you know.
Well, I think it's as you said earlier, when Ferguson let him go, he realised that the way that Roy Keane motivates a player isn't by being nice. And this is why, like, he's not a good manager, because being nice is what's kind of needed now. You kind of have to pamper the boys a bit. Roy Keane doesn't have pampering in him. Roy Keane is go out there, do the job, do it well, or I'm going to scream in your face. And the players don't respond to that now, which is why he doesn't do well as a manager. And it's why I think Alex Ferguson kind of was looking at him coming up into 2005 going, not really a spot for you in this team anymore.
Yeah, but you can see by his comments even there last week when they were talking about on the punditry about Rangers, you know, congratulating Steven Gerrard and Rangers for what they achieved this year, which is an unbelievable achievement.
Yeah, it is.
Forget about whether you're green or blue in Glasgow and how it runs deep in the Old Firm Derby and stuff like that. Like when a team goes out and performs the way they performed this season under Gerrard's tutelage, you have to stand up and go, well, fair play. It doesn't make you any less of a fan, or whether you're Celtic or whether you're Rangers. But you can see what he's talking about there. So why would I be congratulating Rangers? You know, running it down again. You know, again, it runs deep and he's creating the narrative. And I'm sure Celtic fans will love that narrative. There's no doubt about it. But I think, you know, appointing Roy Keane up there as Celtic manager, that would, you know,
if Celtic weren't in a bad enough position as it is, that'd make it worse. Because if he thought the standard of some of the stuff he's seen down in England was bad, just wait till he gets up there.
Oh, well, sure. You seen him when he went up there to play.
Shit show.
When he went up there to play, and he said he got on the bus and they'd lost a game, and one of the lads was just sitting there eating a packet of crisps in a bar, and he said he knew he was in it. He just said it to himself. He was like, I knew that I needed to get out of there straight away, because he was like, these boys didn't care about winning at all.
Yeah. Well, look, as always, lads, it's been great looking back on the career of, again, without a doubt, a Premier League legend and a Manchester United legend. Of course, there is moments of madness in there, But I mean, I think, you know, the achievements that he put in there and the desire and the drive and the job he did for Ferg is without a doubt, you know, one of the best that we've seen in the Premier League.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
You know, as always, head over to YouTube, smash that subscribe and bell notification button. We're also available on Anchor, Spotify, Podbean, wherever you pick up your audio podcast, you'll find the audio versions of these shows. So for myself, Niall Hogan and the upper tier, Ted, thanks for coming on.
Cheers for having me on, bud. It was a good episode.
Brilliant. Darren, always a pleasure.
Enjoyed it, Niall. Thanks, Ted.
And we will catch you again on the other side.